The year is 1916. Europe is drowning in blood. The war that was supposed to be swift, romantic, and decisive has instead devolved into a static, industrialized slaughter, a war of trenches. And in those trenches, a terrible fundamental truth has been exposed. The traditional infantry rifle, the powerful, accurate bolt-action weapon, is tragically obsolete in the cramped, muddy confines of close combat. It is too slow, too long, too cumbersome. The solution, the new voice of the battlefield, is automation. But in America, that voice is still a whisper, waiting for the right engineer, the right mind, to give it form and thunder. This is the story of two weapons, born decades apart, yet inextricably linked. Two submachine guns that tell the entire story of American industrial might, ingenuity, and transition during the most violent century in history. The first is a masterpiece of precision and power, a weapon of high art craftsmanship, the symbol of the roaring, confident 1920s. The second is a crude, functional symbol of wartime expediency, a bare-bones tool that defined the relentless grit of the American fighting man in the 1940s. This is the story of the Thompson and the grease gun. Our journey begins not on a battlefield, but in the mind of a visionary. General John T. Thompson. Thompson was a career military man, a brilliant ordnance officer who had helped supervise the design and production of the Springfield M1903 rifle. He was a man steeped in the tradition of American firearms, yet keenly aware of the industrial slaughter unfolding overseas. He saw the urgent need for a weapon that could deliver maximum firepower, a portable machine gun, into the hands of the individual soldier. Thompson's vision was sparked by the failures of the Great War. He watched as German Sturmtruppen began to field the first rudimentary submachine guns, the MP-18S, clearing trenches with a terrifying volume of fire. He believed he could create a superior weapon, and crucially, he insisted on using an American caliber. He envisioned a firearm that would fire pistol ammunition, yet operate fully automatically, giving the soldier an unbeatable, decisive advantage at ranges under 50 yards. He gave this hypothetical weapon a powerful moniker, the trench broom. It was designed to literally sweep the enemy from their fixed positions. To bring this dream to life, Thompson retired from the Army in 1916 and formed the Auto Ordnance Company. He gathered a brilliant team, including the chief engineer, Theodore H. Eickhoff, and the mechanical genius, Oscar V. Payne. Their technical challenge was immense. Designing an automatic weapon that fired a powerful cartridge like the .45 ACP, yet was light enough and safe enough to be carried and fired by one man, was a formidable engineering puzzle. Thompson was determined to use the .45 ACP cartridge because it was the standard American pistol round, used in the M1911 Colt. More importantly, it was a heavy, slow-moving projectile, delivering a massive, shocking transfer of energy, a decisive, close-range man-stopper. But firing this powerful round automatically using a simple blowback action would tear the weapon apart or endanger the user. The solution came from an unlikely source, an ingenious, patented mechanism known as the Blish lock. Invented by Admiral John Blish, the mechanism used a bronze H-shaped piece that tilted between angled recesses in the bolt and the receiver. It worked on the principle of adhesion. When two different metals are pushed together violently, they momentarily stick or lock. This brief hesitation, caused by the friction lock, was enough to keep the bolt closed for a fraction of a second, allowing chamber pressures to drop safely before the bolt unlocked and cycled backward. It was a complex, beautiful, and utterly novel solution, a piece of mechanical poetry. It was the heart of the first true prototype, the Thompson Model 1919. This prototype was refined, tested, and finally finalized as the Model 1921, the weapon that would, unintentionally, shake the world. The Model 1921 Thompson was a technological marvel, a product of pre-Depression, artisan manufacturing. Every part was meticulously milled from solid steel and expertly finished. The receiver was heavy, strong, and highly polished. It featured distinctive cooling fins on the barrel, a commanding vertical forward grip, which offered superior control over the weapon's muzzle climb, and beautiful furniture made from rich American walnut. It was issued with a versatile attachment system, allowing the user to switch instantly between a compact 20-round box magazine and the massive, circular 50-round L-drum magazine. It was, by any measure, a magnificent firearm. It weighed over 10 pounds, making it heavy, stable, and incredibly controllable. Its cyclic rate of fire was a blistering 800 rounds per minute. When fired, it unleashed a deafening, continuous torrent of .45 caliber projectiles. General Thompson had achieved his vision. He had created the trench broom. But the war for which it was designed, the War of Trenches, had ended in 1918, before the Thompson could be deployed. The United States Army, drastically reducing its size and budget, saw no immediate need for an expensive, highly specialized automatic weapon. The price tag for the M1921 was astronomical for the time. Over $200 per unit, almost half the annual salary of a working man. The U.S. military bought a handful, mostly for testing, and stored the rest. The Thompson was a weapon in search of a war. And in the newly dry streets of 1920s America, it found one. The 18th Amendment, Prohibition, had created a black market of monumental proportions. Gangsters, men like Al Capone, Bugs Moran, and Machine Gun Kelly, built criminal empires on illegal liquor, gambling, and vice. And to protect those empires, to enforce their will, and to wage bloody war against their rivals, they needed the ultimate tool of intimidation and destruction. They needed a weapon that was portable, capable of delivering a staggering volume of fire, and available on the black market. The Thompson, with its terrifying appearance, its powerful sound, and its easy availability through various underworld channels, was perfect. It was the weapon that redefined organized crime. No longer did rivals simply feud with knives or pistols. Now, entire streets could be swept clear in seconds. The drum magazine became an immediate, chilling visual icon. The image of a gangster in a pinstripe suit, his face obscured by a fedora, unleashing a drum-fed torrent of .45 slugs from the hip, became an indelible, frightening part of the American psyche. The sound, the deep, distinctive, high rate of fire rat-tat-tat, became the frantic soundtrack of the Roaring Twenties underworld. The Tommy gun's power was demonstrated in gruesome and spectacular fashion. The most notorious incident remains the St. Valentine's Day Massacre in 1929, when Al Capone's men, disguised as police, lined up 7 members of the rival Moran gang in a Chicago garage and executed them with Thompson submachine guns. The sheer brutality and overwhelming firepower of the attack shocked the entire nation. It was a clear, terrible demonstration of the weapon's uncompromising lethality. Suddenly, the Thompson was no longer an engineering curiosity. It was a national emergency. Law enforcement agencies, the FBI, local police departments, and Treasury agents, found themselves catastrophically outgunned. The standard police issue was still the revolver, a 6-shot weapon that was useless against a Thompson wielding 30 or 50 rounds. The battle between law and organized crime quickly became an arms race, and the Thompson was the terrible prize. Eventually, the police and the FBI, desperate to level the playing field, began acquiring the Thompson themselves, often the refined M1928 model. The agents of the law, chasing bank robbers like John Dillinger and Bonnie and Clyde, carried the same terrifying weapon as their targets. The Thompson cemented its place in American popular culture not just as the gun of the gangster, but as the gun of the lawman determined to take him down. The Great Depression further amplified the Thompson's notoriety. Bank robbers, fleeing desperate economic conditions, used the Tommy gun to hold up banks with speed and devastating finality. The American public was terrified, yet simultaneously fascinated, by the dramatic, high-stakes duels between the law and the outlaws. The Thompson was always at the center of the action, its image splashed across every newspaper, its name shouted in every headline. It had become a legend before it ever fired a shot in a true, global war. But this period of dramatic, bloody fame was coming to a close. As the 1930s drew to a close, Prohibition was repealed, The most famous gangsters were dead or imprisoned, and the weapon's fate was about to be decided on a global stage, far from the streets of Chicago. The world was once again sliding toward war, and the United States military was about to realize that the trench broom, which they had dismissed for 2 decades, was exactly the weapon they would desperately need. The Thompson, the million-dollar plaything of the underworld, was finally going to war. But it would be a very different war, fought on a very different scale, demanding a very different kind of efficiency. The final years of the Thompson's ignoble yet spectacular career on the streets of America coincided precisely with the rising storm clouds over Europe and Asia. The elegant, expensive Tommy gun, once a symbol of criminal excess, was about to be recast as an emblem of American firepower and industrial strength. In the late 1930s, as Germany unleashed the Blitzkrieg and the British faced the existential threat of invasion, the need for effective, high-volume, close-quarters infantry weapons became desperately apparent. The British Expeditionary Force, decimated at Dunkirk, had lost nearly all its equipment. They looked across the Atlantic for solutions, and there, sitting dusty in the warehouses of the Auto Ordnance Company, was the Thompson. The British were the first major military customer for the Thompson, placing massive orders for the M1928 model, desperate for any weapon that could match the German MP-40. The irony was palpable. The weapon designed to defeat the Sturmtruppen in 1918 was finally going to war against the inheritors of that doctrine in 1940. This massive injection of cash from Britain, France, and other Allied nations through the Lend-Lease Act rescued the Auto Ordnance Company and finally mobilized the Thompson for its intended purpose. When the United States officially entered World War II following the attack on Pearl Harbor, the Army and Marine Corps, desperate for a submachine gun, formally adopted the Thompson. They quickly realized the Model 1928 was too complex and too slow to manufacture on the scale of total war. America's industrial might was unparalleled, but that might needed efficiency. This necessity birthed the Thompson M1 and M1A1. The M1 Thompson was a deliberate and vital simplification. General Thompson's sophisticated Blish lock system, the very heart of the M1921's precision, was stripped away. The mechanism was replaced by a simple, straight blowback operation. This was possible because engineers recognized that the heavy weight of the bolt, combined with the power of the recoil spring, was sufficient to hold the breech closed long enough for the .45 ACP's chamber pressure to drop. The complexity of the Blish lock was simply no longer needed, nor affordable. The most visible changes were the removal of the barrel cooling fins, the elimination of the vertical forward grip, replaced by a standard horizontal foregrip, and the decision to simplify the sights. Crucially, the iconic drum magazines were abandoned. They were far too complex to manufacture, prone to jamming in dirty combat conditions, and cost a fortune. The military standardized the M1 on the reliable 20-round and 30-round box magazines. These changes slashed production time, lowered the cost from over $200 down to around $70 per unit, and allowed giants like the Savage Arms Company to crank out the M1 and M1A1 models by the hundreds of thousands. The Thompson had transitioned from an artisan's masterpiece to a reliable, military-grade tool. The Thompson M1 and M1A1 quickly became one of the most recognized and sought-after weapons in the American arsenal. It was the weapon of choice for paratroopers, who needed compact firepower upon landing, for scout units, who often encountered the enemy unexpectedly, for NCOs and officers to lead fire teams and provide suppressing fire, and for tank crews and vehicle drivers as a devastating personal defense weapon. Its presence in major battles defined close-quarters combat for American forces throughout the war. In the Pacific theater, the Thompson proved its deadly worth in the steaming hell of the Jungle Islands. In places like Guadalcanal and Tarawa, where fighting was measured in feet, not yards, the Thompson's heavy .45 caliber slug was supreme. The dense tropical foliage often deflected the smaller, high-velocity rounds of rifles, but the heavy .45 round cut through the brush with brute authority. Against Japanese forces who specialized in banzai charges and close-range infiltration, the Thompson's power, its ability to unleash 30 rounds in mere seconds, was a crucial psychological and tactical countermeasure. The soldiers loved its stopping power. While the riflemen with their M1 Garans were tasked with longer-range engagements, the men with the Thompsons were the room clearers, the close-in specialists. The impact of a .45 slug was instantaneous and decisive, a confidence booster in the terrifying close-range chaos of jungle warfare. However, the sheer weight of the weapon, still over 10 pounds fully loaded, and the humidity that swelled the wooden stock, made carrying it a grueling task in the oppressive heat. In North Africa and Europe, the Thompson provided vital close-range fire support. In the house-to-house fighting in Sicily and the brutal hedgerows of Normandy, the Thompson gave American infantry the means to match and sometimes exceed the firepower of the German MP-40. The Thompson's high cyclic rate, still nearly 700 rounds per minute in the M1A1 version, was faster than the controlled rhythm of the MP-40. This meant the American soldier could put down a heavier wall of fire faster, though the weapon was more difficult to control than its German counterpart. American soldiers, familiar with the doctrine of overwhelming force, often embraced this volume, using it to psychologically dominate an enemy position. But the Thompson, despite its wartime simplification, was still a product of a different era. Every M1A1 still had a heavy, milled steel receiver. Every piece was solid, robust, and over-engineered. This craftsmanship gave it legendary reliability and a satisfying heft, but in the relentless machine of American wartime production, it was becoming an anomaly. The Allies were building ships, tanks, planes, and rifles on an industrial scale that dwarfed any previous effort. The war was no longer fought by artisans, it was fought by assembly lines. And while the Thompson was being manufactured faster than ever before, American industrial leadership looked at the weapons production sheet and saw a red flag. The process was still too slow, the cost was still too high, and the resources, the high-grade steel and the specialized machinery, were needed elsewhere. The Thompson, the legend of the Roaring Twenties and the brute of the early war, was about to be replaced by a piece of raw industrial function. The age of the craftsman's weapon was drawing to a close, and the age of the disposable, mass-produced tool was beginning. The U.S. Ordnance Department was about to commission a submachine gun designed not for beauty or intricate precision, but for the cold, simple necessity of winning the war as cheaply and quickly as possible. They needed a weapon that could be stamped, welded, and tossed onto a supply ship within minutes. The name they gave the project was simple, and the resulting weapon would look like nothing more than a simple tube of metal. The Thompson, even in its simplified M1 and M1A1 forms, remains one of the most mechanically fascinating firearms of the 20th century. Its technical aspects speak volumes about the era it was born into, a time when engineers valued permanence, precision, and the intricate machining of materials above all else. This craftsmanship, while a source of its legendary reliability, was the very thing that made it unsuitable for the scale of World War II. At the heart of the Thompson's design was its cartridge, the .45 ACP, automatic Colt pistol. This round was the key to its immense reputation for stopping power. The .45 ACP is heavy, slow-moving, and low-recoiling. Unlike the 9mm parabellum used by the German MP-40, which was designed for penetration and speed, the .45 was a brute. Its wide diameter and blunt nose delivered a devastating blow to a target, transferring all its kinetic energy immediately. Soldiers on both sides spoke with respect, and often fear, of the .45's ability to take a man out of the fight decisively. This power, however, came at a cost. The heavy slug meant the effective range of the Thompson was limited to little more than 100 yards. It was a close-quarters monster, but a clumsy tool in open terrain. The structure of the gun itself was defined by milled steel. The receiver was a thick, blocky piece, painstakingly carved from a forging. Every curve, every slot, every thread required time, skill, and specialized, high-grade machine tools. Even the simplified M1A1 still used a large, heavy, one-piece bolt, often weighing over a pound, contributing to the weapon's massive 10.5-pound weight when loaded with a 30-round stick magazine. This weight made the Thompson incredibly stable and controllable, taming the powerful .45 round even at its high cyclic rate of around 600 to 700 rounds per minute. Its firing cycle was relatively fast, creating that unmistakable, angry rat-tat-tat sound that was distinctly American. The magazines also evolved. The complex L and C drum magazines of the Gangster Era were quickly dropped. While cinematic and capable of holding 50 or 100 rounds, they were heavy, noisy, required specialized tools to load, and were notoriously unreliable in the mud and dust of a battlefield. The military standardized the far more rugged and reliable 20-round and 30-round box, or stick, magazines. This standardization was crucial for logistics, but it meant that the soldier had to carry far more weight in spare magazines to equal the firepower of a German MP-40 or a Soviet PPSH-41, both of which had high-capacity options. By 1942, American industry was pumping out Thompsons in massive numbers, a testament to the nation's manufacturing muscle. Yet, military procurement experts, looking at the British Sten gun and the emerging German MP-40, saw a horrifying disparity in efficiency. The Sten gun, a piece of welded pipe and stamped metal, cost less than $10 to produce. The Thompson, even in its simplified M1A1 form, still cost $70. The time required to machine a single Thompson receiver could produce the entire body of a Jeep or several hundred stamped rifle parts. The American logistics chain was built on abundance, but the war was devouring resources, specifically the high-quality alloys and specialized machining capacity needed for Thompsons. The need for a submachine gun that was truly designed for mass production, not artisan excellence, became critical. The Wehrmacht had replaced the MP-38 with the stamped MP-40. The British had created the Sten. America needed its own answer, a weapon that symbolized the gritty, cheap, and effective industrial power of the modern age. The call went out from the Ordnance Department in 1942 for a replacement submachine gun. The requirements were stark. It had to be chambered in the powerful .45 ACP, it had to be reliable, and above all, it had to be fast and cheap to produce. The winning design would not come from the Thompson's Auto Ordnance Company, but from the Guide Lamp Division of General Motors. This was a division primarily used to making automobile headlights and other stamped automotive accessories. The choice of manufacturer underscored the new design philosophy. This gun was going to be stamped, pressed, and welded, not milled. It was going to be built like a car part. The primary designer was George Hyde, who partnered with the engineer Frederick Sampson. Hyde looked at the successful principles of the European stamped guns and fused them with American requirements. The result was the M3 submachine gun, immediately and universally nicknamed the grease gun by the troops for its uncanny resemblance to the lubricating tool used by mechanics in every American garage. The M3 grease gun was everything the Thompson was not. Where the Thompson was elegant, the grease gun was aggressively ugly. Where the Thompson was precisely machined, the M3 was intentionally crude. Its entire body was made from two halves of stamped sheet metal, seam welded together. The entire process of manufacture was designed to minimize machining. The number of parts was drastically reduced, and the remaining parts were simple stampings or castings. It was an open-bolt, straight blowback weapon, just like the later Thompsons, but its operating mechanism was far simpler. The rate of fire was reduced to a slow, deliberate 450 rounds per minute. This was a key design decision. A slower rate of fire not only conserved ammunition but, crucially, made the weapon less prone to jamming and allowed for simpler, less robust mechanical components. It was designed to be reliable, even if it wasn't beautiful. The grease gun had a simple, retractable wire stock, again, a study in function over form. When extended, it provided a stable shoulder rest. When collapsed, it made the weapon even shorter and more compact than the M1A1 Thompson, perfect for the cramped conditions inside a Sherman tank or a half-track. It weighed just 8 pounds unloaded, significantly lighter than the Thompson. The M3 represented the ultimate expression of America's wartime production genius. It originally cost a mere $15 to manufacture, a staggering contrast to the Thompson's price tag. It proved that the American industrial system could pivot overnight, turning out millions of complex tools of war using simple, accessible technology. The arrival of the M3 grease gun signaled the end of the Thompson's reign as the frontline American submachine gun. The two weapons, though they shared the same powerful .45 ACP heart, stood on opposite sides of a vast industrial divide. The Thompson was the last great military weapon of the pre-war era, a relic of craftsmanship and high cost. The grease gun was the unapologetic face of total war, cheap, fast, and disposable. And in the hands of the American fighting man, these two contrasting philosophies would clash on the battlefields of the world. The American arsenal in 1943 presented the world with a stark visual and philosophical contradiction: the Thompson and the M3 grease gun. They both shared the same purpose: to deliver overwhelming close-range firepower using the heavy .45 ACP round, yet they represented two fundamentally different approaches to warfare and manufacturing. Their comparison is not merely a technical one. It is a narrative of America's journey from the craftsmanship of the past to the industrial efficiency of the future. The Thompson M1A1 was the legacy weapon. It had the heft of confidence and the lineage of a legend. When a soldier picked it up, they felt the satisfying weight of its milled steel receiver, the polished smoothness of its walnut stock, and the intricate precision that allowed it to cycle with a rhythmic, rapid rat-tat-tat. Its advantages were clear. Its substantial weight made it exceptionally stable, and its high rate of fire meant maximum lead could be put downrange instantly. For a squad leader leading a charge or a Marine clearing a bunker, the Thompson felt like a powerful, reliable extension of their will. But its beauty was its burden. That heavy, precise construction meant higher cost, slower production, and an excessive demand for high-grade steel that was desperately needed for tank armor and destroyer hulls. The Thompson symbolized the early war era, a time when America was still gearing up, drawing on pre-war designs, and valuing quality over sheer volume. The M3 grease gun, by contrast, was a product of pure, cold pragmatism. It was ugly, with the utilitarian look of a plumber's tool. But its very ugliness was its strength. It was designed to be handled by mass-production assembly workers at General Motors, not specialized gunsmiths. The extensive use of stamped sheet metal and welding meant that one factory could turn out dozens of grease guns for the price of a single Thompson. Its advantages lay in its brutal simplicity. The M3 was lighter at 8 pounds, and far more compact with its retractable wire stock. Its slow, deliberate 450 rounds per minute rate of fire was its mechanical genius. This slow cycle meant the weapon was exceptionally easy to control, requiring less effort to keep on target, and drastically reduced wear and tear, leading to superb reliability. While the Thompson was built for speed, the grease gun was built for endurance. This dichotomy played out across the global battlefields. In the Pacific jungles, the Thompson initially reigned supreme. Its high rate of fire was crucial for breaking up sudden Japanese banzai charges, giving the Marines and Army troops a psychological edge. However, the jungle was a brutal test of the Thompson's complexity. The intricate blishlock might have been removed, but the heavy weight, combined with the difficulty of keeping the wooden stock dry and the 30-round magazine free of corrosive mud, became a liability. The grease gun, when it arrived in numbers in the later stages of the Pacific Campaign, proved surprisingly effective. Its metal components were easily cleaned, and its simplicity made field stripping and maintenance trivial. More importantly, its compact size made it ideal for moving through dense undergrowth and for the desperate fighting inside tunnels and pillboxes. In the European theater, the difference in deployment was more pronounced. The Thompson remained the preferred submachine gun for the most exposed infantry, such as paratroopers in the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions. For a paratrooper, the Thompson was a proven, reliable piece of equipment that delivered immediate, powerful results upon hitting the ground. The cost was irrelevant compared to the importance of immediate survival. However, the M3 grease gun quickly became the standard sidearm for the mechanized forces. Tank crews, with their extremely cramped working environments inside the turret and hull of a Sherman tank, immediately valued the M3's short, retractable profile. A Thompson, even folded, was often too long to maneuver quickly inside a fighting vehicle. The M3 was perfectly suited for the desperate moment when a crew had to bail out and fight on foot or clear an enemy attempting to climb aboard. In Italy and through the hedgerows of Normandy, the M3's slow, controlled rhythm proved its tactical worth. Against the German MP40, which also favored a slower rate of fire, the M3 was easier to keep supplied, easier to handle, and cheaper to replace. Soldiers found that the M3, despite its appearance, was rugged. Its minimal moving parts and large gaps in the receiver allowed dirt and grit to pass through without causing a catastrophic malfunction, a stark contrast to the delicate feed system of the enemy MP40. The M3's Achilles heel, ironically, was not its stamped receiver, but its cocking handle. Early M3 models used a non-reciprocating cocking handle, a lever that was pulled to draw the bolt back, then remained stationary during firing. This handle was prone to bending and breaking if the gun was handled roughly. This flaw led to the immediate creation of the improved M3A1. The M3A1 was the final and perhaps most successful evolution of the grease gun. It eliminated the fragile cocking handle entirely. The soldier was now instructed to simply insert a finger into the ejection port, hook it onto the slot in the bolt, and pull the bolt back. It was a cruder method, but infinitely more robust and reliable. This tiny change, eliminating one complex part, perfectly encapsulated the M3's philosophy: simplicity through elimination. The narrative of the M3's adoption is one of eventual, though often reluctant, acceptance. Many infantrymen, initially issued the M3, felt cheated. They viewed the Thompson as the real submachine gun, the one from the movies, the one with the wood and the noise. The grease gun felt flimsy, cheap, and disposable. But the battlefield is the ultimate arbiter, and over time, the M3's reliable functionality won over the skeptics. It was an essential tool of survival, and its simplicity proved to be its greatest form of power. By the end of the war, the Thompson had largely been relegated to supporting roles, mostly in the hands of officers, military police, and special forces. The M3 and M3A1 grease guns had taken over as the primary American submachine gun, a quiet testament to the industrial victory of the United States. The Thompson represented the power America could wield. The grease gun represented the efficiency America had to achieve to win. The end of World War II did not mean the end of the Thompson or the grease gun. On the contrary, their story broadened, transitioning from a purely American narrative to a global one. Both weapons, symbols of distinct American industrial epochs, found new lives on battlefields where the lines between friend and enemy were far blurrier than in the great global conflict that birthed them. Their widespread global impact and post-war use became a measure of their enduring, albeit contrasting, qualities. The Thompson, the heavy, powerful legacy weapon, was distributed widely through the Lend-Lease program and later through post-war military aid. It became a coveted possession in the arsenals of emerging nations and, ironically, in the hands of various resistance and liberation movements. In the immediate aftermath of the war, the British and the French, who had been major early Thompson customers, deployed them in their rapidly disintegrating colonial empires. The French Foreign Legion carried the Thompson into the jungles of Indochina, where its powerful .45 ACP round was once again deemed highly effective in the humid, close-range chaos of jungle fighting against the Viet Minh. Its reliability, despite its weight, made it a favored weapon for patrols. Similarly, it was seen in the hands of various forces during the Greek Civil War and the early stages of the conflicts in the Middle East. Its value was simple. It was a proven, durable, and instantly recognizable tool of war. However, the Thompson's high production cost and complexity meant that once the massive stockpiles were exhausted, new manufacturing was rarely initiated. The M1 and M1A1 models that survived the war were simply too expensive to produce against the backdrop of cheaper, lighter, post-war designs. It was a superb, but fiscally irresponsible, weapon for the modern, budget-conscious military. The Thompson was destined to be phased out, a casualty of economics rather than battlefield failure. The M3 grease gun, however, was built to last, not through delicate craftsmanship, but through sheer, robust simplicity. Its initial cost of around $15, a tenth of the price of the early Thompsons, meant that America had produced them in staggering numbers, and the massive remaining stockpiles were distributed globally for decades. The M3's simplicity made it an instant favorite for military aid. It required minimal specialized tooling or training, making it ideal for the rapidly expanding armies of the Cold War. When the Korean War erupted in 1950, the M3A1 was the standard U.S. submachine gun, deployed extensively against the North Korean and Chinese forces. In the brutal, freezing conditions of Korea, the grease gun's minimal number of moving parts and its open-bolt mechanism, which handled ice and snow better than many closed-bolt designs, proved its enduring reliability. The ability to simply pull the bolt back with a finger and cycle the weapon, even with heavy gloves, was a practical advantage hard-won in the sub-zero environment. Its compactness truly came into its own in the new era of armored warfare. The M3A1 remained the standard weapon for U.S. tank crews well into the 1990s. Its ability to be stored safely in the racks of an M48, M60, or even an M1 Abrams tank, and its devastating effectiveness in close-range self-defense ensured its longevity. The final production models were so robust that many were essentially immortal. Perhaps the most surprising chapter in the M3's life came during the Vietnam War. While the Thompson was largely absent, replaced by the M16, the M3A1 saw significant, quiet service. Its short barrel and heavy .45 slug were favored by U.S. Special Forces and tunnel rats. In the terrifying absolute darkness of the Viet Cong tunnel complexes, where a rifle was useless, the M3A1's size and ability to deliver massive stopping power without excessive muzzle flash were critical. Its slow rate of fire also reduced the chance of a soldier running dry on a magazine in the middle of a desperate subterranean exchange. Simultaneously, the M3's design, being so simple and easy to replicate with basic industrial tools, inspired numerous foreign copies and adaptations. The Argentine FMAP-PAM and the Chilean FAMI SAF are direct descendants, testaments to the M3's enduring influence on stamped metal submachine gun design across Latin America. The grease gun's legacy is one of silent, operational success, a weapon that, while never seeking fame, was always there, getting the job done efficiently and cheaply. The operational careers of both weapons finally wind down in the late 20th century, replaced by more modern, lighter, and more accurate assault rifles chambered in intermediate cartridges. But while their military days ended, their cultural life was just beginning. The final chapter in the story of the Thompson and the grease gun is not written in blood and gunpowder, but on silver screens, in television studios, and across the digital battlefields of popular culture. Their military careers may have peaked and faded, but their cultural legacy ensures their immortality as two of the most potent symbols of 20th century America. The Thompson submachine gun achieved an iconic status that few firearms, and perhaps no other submachine gun, can match. Its image was cemented during the Gangster Era, an era that Hollywood has mined relentlessly for drama, action, and villainy. The Tommy gun is instantly recognizable, a shorthand for the Prohibition Era, the roaring defiance of the 1920s, and the raw, untamed violence of organized crime. From James Cagney to Al Pacino, the Thompson is the silent, heavy co-star in countless films, defining the genre. Its distinct, heavy walnut stock, its commanding vertical foregrip, and above all, the ominous, circular profile of the drum magazine, are visually dramatic. When a director wants to signal organized crime or historical authenticity, the Thompson is the automatic choice. It represents a time when weapons were built with a terrifying beauty, embodying a destructive elegance that fascinates and repels audiences simultaneously. The very sound of its rapid signature rat-tat-tat is a nostalgic echo of classic cinema and a warning of swift, brutal retribution. Its enduring popularity ensures high prices in the collector market, where a pristine M1921 can fetch tens of thousands of dollars, valued more for its history and beauty than for its functionality. The M3 grease gun's cultural journey, however, is one of quiet utility. It is the perennial workhorse, reliable, persistent, but lacking the theatrical flair of the Thompson. Because the M3 was intentionally designed for function, with its ugly stamped metal body and utilitarian retractable wire stock, it lacks the visual drama necessary for stardom. While it appeared in countless war films, often carried by tank crews or behind the lines, it rarely gets the heroic close-up. It simply looks too much like the simple tool it was. Yet, this lack of cinematic fame is itself a cultural statement. The grease gun represents the understated competence and industrial pragmatism of the American fighting man, the soldier who cared less about what his gun looked like and more about whether it worked when he needed it most. It symbolizes the true, grittier reality of the later war years, where mass production and efficiency were the true heroes. In the digital world, the contrast continues. The Thompson is a staple in every major war-themed video game, from Call of Duty to Medal of Honor. Players gravitate toward its aggressive sound and powerful close-range damage. The grease gun, while present, is often the weapon used by the secondary characters or chosen for its compact size, reflecting its true role as a specialty weapon. These two weapons, therefore, offer a perfect duality of the American military-industrial story. The Thompson represents the optimism and ingenuity of the pre-war era, the American dream of perfection through precision. It was expensive, beautifully crafted, powerful, and became a legend based on drama and spectacle. It was a weapon of unparalleled quality, the last hurrah of the artisan gunmaker. The M3 grease gun represents the industrial necessity of total war, the pragmatic drive for simplicity through stamping. It was cheap, ugly, reliable, and became a success based on logistics and volume. It was the ultimate statement of America's ability to win the war by mass-producing victory. They share the same caliber, the massive .45 ACP slug, but they fire it with different voices. The Thompson screams with the high-pitched fury of a raging craftsman. The grease gun whispers with the slow, controlled confidence of a global industrial power. In the end, both the Thompson and the grease gun were superseded by a new generation of weapons, the assault rifles, which combined the power of a rifle with the automatic fire of a submachine gun. But their legacy endures. The simplicity of the M3 grease gun paved the way for every successful stamped metal submachine gun that followed, proving that high cost did not equal high quality on the modern battlefield. The Thompson, meanwhile, taught the world that the individual soldier needed personal, portable, and overwhelming firepower to survive the violence of the 20th century. They are more than metal and wood. They are physical artifacts of American history, telling a continuous story of how a nation, faced with the greatest crisis the world had ever known, first deployed a weapon of luxury and legend, and then, in a pivot of unmatched industrial genius, replaced it with a weapon of pure, unrelenting necessity. The Thompson and the grease gun, two submachine guns, one American story, forever locked in the American imagination.